Okie dokie. Hello, hello, hello. Turn off a few sounds here.
Hold on. How's everyone doing today?
It is awesome. Everybody right now is still on mute.
Ah,
We're going to give it a couple of minutes, but
what about in the chat?
the
I don't know. I don't know everyone who's here. So, where's everyone from? I'm just curious. I'm in Miami for anyone who's curious.
I'll do you a couple of introductions. One second. I know a few people, and
Okay.
let me do a real
Wow.
quick one. If you want to unmute yourself and say hi for a couple of seconds, you have the ability. I had that in there. Oh, Todd says he's a first timer. Sydney is from South Africa. Sydney Kloppers, I know well. And Michael Sabler is in the house too. I remember he's somewhere East Coast somewhere. New Jersey, something like that. Is that right, Michael?
Michael,
Oh, Andy.
we're in Pennsylvania. I went to college in Philly, so that's why I was curious.
Very, very cool. Let me make sure that you guys are able to unmute yourselves. It does say, yep, yeah, you can do all of that. I'm not expecting a big group today, but I think it's kind of cool. I always, my favorite is actually under 10 people. Then it turns into a discussion, not a kind of a major like event that you need to manage. But nice background you have there, Robbie. Very cool.
Yeah, well, it did come from you, so I take no credit here.
So mine is actually, I've got the interactive background. If anybody wants to test it, you can hit any of the emojis on the dashboard and they should appear up here. I use that in events, like if you want to vote on something, let's say you want to say, hey, do you guys want to discuss storytelling today? Or do you want to get into like systems and funnel building? So give me a 1 for story and give me a 2, and then the things come up in the background there. If no one's testing that, then I'm going to do it from here. I just got to open up another screen and go to the Capital Cafe. So then if you hit those emojis up there, they literally, here, there's even a coffee emoji. I did used to, Robbie, do you remember my first cafe had like a middle finger in it? But everybody just pressed that and nobody pressed any of the other ones. So, oh, Bob Stearns is joining too. Bob Stearns is an old contact friend of mine. Lives up in New York. It's a very successful capital raiser, third-party marketer, and has raised a lot of capital and been very successfully doing that. So I think, I mean, I know, Robbie, you're always very short on time. We have a very hard stop at 11:30. So why don't we kind of get cracking, I suppose, right?
Look at that. You took a lesson from me last time where I said we need to get after it faster.
Yeah. I like to say hello to everybody because for me this is like a kind of a catch up with a lot of people I haven't seen for ages and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, and Sydney Kloppers knows I like to talk cock a little bit in the mornings.
In the
So
morning,
yeah,
Anric, I think you like to talk no matter what time of day it is. Let's be honest. It just
yeah, yeah.
the only thing that changes is what type of liquid you're drinking, whether it's coffee or wine.
Yeah, that is cool. And I don't know if you can see the gallery. I've just highlighted the two of us at the moment, but Eric Dugan is coming in too. He is a client of mine who's actually become a really good friend too. So I'm really super happy that he's from 3D Capital. He's up in New Jersey. And there are stacks of people still coming in late. They are obviously not German like me. I'm always early, 10 minutes early. My wife drives me nuts, by the way. She's just always late for everything. And she just thinks, you know what, that's how it's supposed to be. But yeah, drives me nuts. All right, so Robbie, floor is yours, microphone is yours. You go.
I saw your post yesterday, Anric. Every time we talk about systems for raising capital, I'm always blown away. It's definitely not the thing I love. Anyone who knows me knows I love storytelling, given that I was a former trial lawyer. So that's the world that I like to live in. I think we were just talking about how when I'd go into trial, I didn't really have a system. Even when I'd go into trial, I just kind of played it as it went. But I would love to hear more I mean, I think it's a good topic to go into of like, how do you think about building systems to raise, like, what does that look like? What have you found successful? What are you seeing other people do that works? What are the
Okay.
mistakes? Kind of all that sort of stuff. I think that to me, as someone who doesn't like systems and brain doesn't work that way, would love to dive into that.
Yeah, because it really came from, I suppose, my own trial and errors. You know, for those of you who don't know the whole background of it, is that I really started basically, in Hong Kong. I would say 1997 when I moved there. I was already a very wealthy man, and I lost literally everything
Anric,
playing around.
Anric, just so you know, I was only 10 back then. So
Yeah.
this
Uh,
is very, very different here.
so the basically the way that I'm going to make this very short, I started playing around with Hang Seng and Nikkei futures and options, and literally lost absolutely everything. Yeah, I mean, was about $1.5 million in the hole, and those were the days where we still actually, paid our debts, and nobody would forgive them for us. And I really just thought, okay, I've got to go and find uncorrelated asset classes, and that's how I got into managed futures. And Bob Stearns knows we were both at Kenmar. Then I joined Kenmar and basically started raising capital. And I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And I would just go after it, and everybody was a prospect, and I was just relentless. I was the 50-page PowerPoint guy, and I would baffle people with the knowledge, either that or bore them into tears that they wrote me a check just to get me to shut up, right? And over time, I started getting very, very good at raising capital. And I had this dilemma, though. Every kind of January 1st, you basically started from scratch. And your business lived and died based on your own energy and your connections with people and being able to do that. And it was just so exhausting that eventually I'm like, you know what, I can't keep on top of this. Why don't I just create a system? And at first I started on Excel basically. And I said, look, what is my sales process? My sales process is these 7 steps. How can I make this kind of in some way automated so that I can turn up there on a Tuesday morning with a hangover and go, right, all you fuckers, how I'm going to move you from step 3 to step 4. You see what I mean? So if you allow me to draw a little picture, I'm not very good at explaining anything. So the framework for our Robbie's and my raising capital event is that we have really broken down successful capital raising as having 3 ingredients, right? Number 1, obviously, I need a pen here. I've somehow got the wrong pen selected, is strategy. And hopefully you can read my handwriting. Plus, what Robbie brings to the table is really the story. But if you don't have a system, an automated, scalable system, you have to put in so much energy and so much time in order to get this going. So I really became the systems guy. How can I create a system that takes my story into and puts it in front of the right people? So when I mean system, let me see, what I'll do, I'll just clear this here, 1 second. Got a new toy, got to play with it. What I mean by system, and I've spoken to Eric Dugan about this so many times, so his eyes might glaze over. Oh, all the dogs just came in. I'm going to be on my own with 4 dogs for the next week, so that's going to be fun. So think of it as basic funnel building, Robbie, right? So if we made this a very, very simple system, and let's say you have a 4-step sales process, because you can't go all the way to 3rd or 4th base with your future wife on the first date. I mean, maybe you can as being a Texan, but the rest of us mortals, we can't do that.
Hold on. Texans have good values. We are from the South. We do things the right way, Anric. I don't appreciate the shade.
Well, Texans have very, very, very big, you can't say this word on the internet, but big cojones, and they swing for the fences. So that's what I meant with that. But basically, you've got to warm somebody up. And I think you guys have all seen this in LinkedIn. I call them the pitch slappers, right? These are people who literally say, hey, you're an investor. Here's my pitch book. We're looking for $15 million. And literally, I have a verbal cue for that, and it looks like this. Because that's what my brain says. If somebody who I don't know, who I haven't built a relationship with, who I don't have trust with, comes and says, give me your money. And people don't realize that even if you're going after institutional dollars, there are people at the end of that desk, there are people at the end of that phone who at the end of the day will always invest with people. People don't buy companies, people buy people, right? And this is what obviously Robbie gets into in our Raising Capital live event, about how to create that story and how to tell that story. What I do is show you how to break it down and bring it into a step-by-step system. Because, you know, let's just take, I'll pick on Bob Stearns for a second. You know what I mean? Now, Bob loves beautiful fast cars and beautiful restaurants and hotels, and he's very, very successful at raising capital. But you cannot afford to get into your, I hope you still have that beautiful Jaguar, Bob. You can't get into your Jaguar to go drive to the Four Seasons to go and entertain some guy who is never going to give you any money, right? You have to basically create a digital system so that he goes from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4 and whatever, so that right at the bottom of the funnel, he wants to invest with you. He already thinks that this is what he needs. He already has trust and engagement with you. You've built a relationship where the conclusion is almost like this already done thing. And if you'll allow me, let's just keep an eye on the time, okay? If you'll allow me to kind of just illustrate that a little bit. And it's really because most men, and I think about it like this, right? When you meet another man, Robbie, they always go, oh, so Mr. Crabtree, what do you do for a living, right? It's like, it's the only question that men seem to be able to ask. And never ever answer that question, by the way, because that's not what they want to know. The amateurs, and especially you see them on LinkedIn, they start by talking about their what. And it's absolutely wrong, because nobody gives a shit about your what until they, number one, know who they are, who you are. But I always call this like who to the power 2, because it's about who you are and who they are. Are they the right person? Are they your right fit client? And some people have seen Simon Sinek's video about start with why, but the real pros start with who, because there is this delicate dance between the who and the why. Who you are and why I am the right who to serve you, and why you are the right who to be a client of my why. You see what I mean? And until you've got this part right, this delicate dance between the who and the why, do not send people, and I'm going to use the word freely, do not send people a fucking fact sheet or a pitch book, okay? Because you are trying to go to third base or fourth base before you've done first base, right? And only after you've done this can we get into the how. And the how is basically how I work with people like you to solve the problem that you have, that we both had, or the problem that I used to have, right? And nobody's going to listen to your how until you've engaged them, wrong side, with your who and your why. Now that is where systems come in. You have to create a system for this, because you can't wing it. You need to throw 1,000 people into this funnel and systematically, using video, using Zooms. By the way, for everybody who's wondering, you guys right now in the audience are in our system, because we want to obviously invite you guys to raisingcapital.live in June. But how can we do that if we haven't spoken to you? Make sense? Right? So you're literally in our system because we have identified that you are the right fit for us, and we would like to talk to you and get to know you guys and show you what we do. You see what I mean? So it's literally a live system in process. And you've got to automate this because you can't do this alone. You can't wing this. You don't have enough time for it. It needs to be systematic because there are going to be people, Robbie, that just don't like you, right? Now, for me, that's super easy. Some people don't like my accent. For some people, I'm way too outspoken. I'm like all the way out there on the spectrum politically, whatever, you know what I mean? And they just don't like me. And I'm going to offend them. And I'm like, well, why don't I offend you right now in the beginning of our relationship? Let's not go before we've invested $5 million in each other before I offend you. So that's basically where I go with systems, Robbie.
Anric, I'm going to jump in here because I think
Yeah.
the interesting piece, one of the things I always say about the storytelling, which a lot of people struggle to really embrace, is that a great story is both a filter and a magnet by design, right? Like the whole idea of the story isn't that everyone should like it. It isn't that everyone should be attracted to it. It is that it should very clearly help people say, ah, that's the wrong fit for me, or, oh, I need to, like, I'm pulling in, I need to learn more. And it goes back to your, this idea of the who and making sure that people know who you are. Like, to me, it's why whenever I start thinking about story, the first place I start is like, what is the founder? And we use that term right loosely in terms of the person who's running the fundraise, right? What is their origin story, right? Like how do I get to know that person? And it's very easy then to figure out, okay, if I know who that person is, then I have the ability to pull myself into what is they're talking about from a story of the vision of the fund, of the venture, of the company, of whatever it is that you're raising for. Then you have this frame of glass half full, of I like them because I trust them because they've built authority and they've connected with me. So it echoes a lot of the storytelling that has to go into it as well.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, before I met you, and I thought of bringing you into this event, because I've done this for a couple of years where I teach people how to create these systems and so on, and it's actually a hard lift, because it's easy for me to say, okay, so at step 2 you've got to tell a little version of your story, right? Because I always say, and I've said this to Eric before, so hopefully this rings home, is that you've got to have a very good 30-second escalator pitch, almost like you're standing on an escalator with somebody, and those 30 seconds earn you the right to speak deeper for 3 minutes, and those next 3 minutes will earn you the right to actually talk about your whole story for 30 minutes. If you attempt to try and hit somebody with your 30-minute story on an escalator, they literally are going to run. If you try it in an elevator, it's even worse. They're going to call the cops on you, right? So that's when I kind of bumped into Robbie Crabtree, and I started listening, to some of your content. And I'm like, wow, man, this guy has a gift. He really, really has a gift, because he knows how to break down the story that needs to be told and make it into sizable bite-sized chunks. And it's literally the best way I've ever heard. And so you were, just speak absolutely frank here, you're an absolute godsend for me, because I would tell people that you need to tell your story, but I couldn't really train them as well as you do on how to create that story in the first place and then absolutely deliver it. Because in our industry, remember, I come from a different industry. We come from the money industry, right? And I've always found that the people who are the best money managers are literally the worst storytellers. I mean, they're terrible at it. And the people that are really great storytellers, yeah, normally you want to end up for dinner with them, but you don't want to really give them your money. That's why you need capital introducers. That's why you need capital raisers, people who can actually go and tell that story properly. So, between you, me, and the whole internet, you're an absolute godsend when I found you. And I'm like, you know what, this guy nails it. You know what I mean? So, obviously, we're going to try and teach that to people in 3 days. That is basically the game plan, right? And we've broken it down into those 3 aspects of strategy plus story plus systems equals success, right? But then it obviously still has to be iterated. So, Robbie and I were talking about this before you guys joined us. Our right fit client is somebody who implements, who actually does the work. Because you can go and get all the shelf help, I call it, in the world that you want, but you actually need to turn up. You need to do the work. You need to iterate, and you go, oh, yep, that didn't land. I need to go and do that differently. But it never, ever, ever starts with a pitch book or a fact sheet. Do not send that to people unless they're literally begging for it, because it's almost like it's almost like getting the check at the end of the bill. It's like the thing that you get, but it's not the thing that makes the deal. So that's my 2 cents for the morning.
It reminds me, back when I was a trial lawyer, I would say inside of any trial, when I would give a closing argument, there were moments of perfection, but I was never perfect. And a lot of people, would want me to unpack that. And I say, well, there were moments of perfection when I knew I had the jury. Like, I knew they were with me. I knew they were going to vote my way. I could read all the micro cues. I could read the body language. I could see them leaning in. Like, I had it. I knew that person was sold on my position. But I would always sit down at the end of the closing argument and be like, damn it, I forgot to say this. Or I stumbled over that phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Or I meant to put it in this order and I got it out of place. And so then I would always, my cases were very serious, and they always get appealed after, someone gets sentenced for 50, 60, 70, even life. They're appealing the case. Mm-hmm. And when they appeal it, you get the transcript. And I would always read my closing arguments afterwards. And as I'm reading it, it was brutal to watch, right, to read, because you're just like, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I did that. And it was this understanding of, there's always so much more room to improve, even if in that moment it was perfect because it got the job done. It did exactly what I needed to do. And that's why I love this idea of storytelling, but more so in the way that it is implemented and executed and iterated upon, because that's really where the magic comes out. I love the story of Steve Jobs and the iPhone. And Johnny Ivey talks about this. He says when on day one, when they started building the iPhone, on day one, Jobs started to test out the story that he was going to share on the stage when he gave the keynote years later. And he said he constantly was just testing these ideas and seeing what resonated and what worked and what didn't work. And so by the time he got on stage to deliver this massive unveiling, he knew every single beat. And it's the same approach that comedians do. Kevin Hart has talked about this, where when he's running before a big tour, he does little events and he's testing it. And then when he feels good enough about that, he goes to a bigger event, a bigger venue, and he tests that. But the interesting thing that stood out to me was he's not just listening for, are they laughing? He's listening for the way they're laughing. And if they aren't laughing the right way, he'll go back to the start and say, I gotta scratch it and go back to the beginning. And I think that's what it takes to get to this level of mastery, right? Is you're willing to get into the arena and test it and put yourself out there and do the work. But you're also willing to say, hey, if something's not working or it can be better, I'm going to do that work as well to really drive it that way. And again, it's why we paired up, right? Because the whole funnel and systems and all this sort of stuff, you've seen the way that I operate. That's not the thing that I love the most. And so I think it's so important to have this trifecta, right? This triangle. I think a lot in rule of three and triangles because of rhetoric and different things. And that triangle really gives you that strength of systems, story, and strategy. You've got to have all three, or else it ends up being really weak and easy to push over.
So we got another few more minutes, and this is something I've actually never asked you. Tell me the story a little bit of how did you get from being like a kick-ass trial lawyer to being so successful in the venture capital space, and then become this, what is essentially one of the world's best storytelling coaches. Give me the short version. I've never actually asked you how and why you did that.
The last 16 months of my career as a prosecutor, I was trying child abuse cases. Every physical abuse of children, sexual abuse of children, and even some child death cases. And I in 16 months, I tried 16 cases to trial, so about one a month. The caseload that I took on when I came into that unit, I had 250 cases on my caseload that I took over. Many of them were 4 to 8 years old, which is absolutely horrific. And wow. I was able to do a lot of good work there, right? Of the 16 cases I tried, 16 ended up in wins. So it was very, very rare to go 100% on a win rate inside of the child abuse world, because child abuse is basically the child says this happened and the defendant says, no, it didn't. That's all your evidence, really, because it's always a delayed outcry. There's no physical evidence. No one saw it happening, because why would you? It's child abuse. And so I would try these cases, and like at the end, it was nice because there was justice, there was closure for the family. But the reality is their lives were still forever changed and ruined. And they were never going to be able to have, what we would consider a normal life in many ways. And that was really difficult. But the more difficult part was when I'd go back to my office after a week or 2 week long trial, I would have 15 brand new cases on my desk that were just as bad, if not worse. And honestly, I started asking myself really tough questions of like, am I actually doing anything? Am I having a positive impact in the world? Now, this is not to say that I wasn't, because doing that work is really valuable. And my colleagues who do it today, I'm like, they're doing God's work in so many ways. It's dark. It is like, to this day, I think about the victims of the cases every day. There's not a day that goes by that I do not think about them, do not think about their families, do not think about the darkness that I saw, what they're dealing with. Like, that is just like, I will never get away from that ever. It's incredibly hard to think about it. But I didn't want to continue to be reactive. I didn't want to continue to just like put band-aids on things after they were already broken. So I looked at myself and said, I need to get into a world where I can have more positive impact on the front end. Because when you look at child abuse, you can see certain things, certain reasons why it's happening. And if we can solve some of these problems, we will decrease the number of those cases. So I said, how can I create value in the world that will go downstream, where two things can happen? One, we can provide technology and resources to those individuals to prevent a lot of these cases. And two, how can I build my own wealth so that I can have the impact that I want in some of these worlds that I know really well? I love looking at speakers. Ted Sorensen is one of my idols. He was the speechwriter and advisor for JFK. JFK gave the speech, "We'll put a man on the moon." JFK was instrumental in the civil rights movement. He was instrumental in the, solving the Cuban Missile Crisis. So what I said was, I want to work with people who are taking moonshots and really pushing the world forward. But it's not politicians today. We all know that. The people who are forward are business leaders, are people who are able to deploy huge sums of capital and say, go fix this problem, go solve it, go build something. But when I looked at that ecosystem, what I saw inside of the technology world, among CEOs, amongst executive teams, amongst venture capitalists, private equity investors, was these people have great ideas and are really smart and are doing great work, and they have no idea how to communicate. They have no idea how to sell someone on a vision. They have no idea how to convince people of things, build an argument that touches on both logic and emotion to drive home those points. And I said, I can be the Ted Sorensen for this world. And by doing so, create massive value inside of the world from those people, with all the ripple effects they'll have, because I'll only take on work that I think is impactful, and will not do things that I think are either net neutral or harmful. And I can also build my own wealth as a result of using this skill, because raising capital allows people to move faster, build bigger, take bigger swings. But it also looks exactly like a trial to me, from all the stages that you have to hit, from jury selection to opening statement to witness to closing argument. So that's how I decided that I was going to go in and do this. It made sense to my brain, and I just decided to jump in and go after it. And the rest is kind of been history.
So I got a cool idea for next Thursday. Why don't we maybe next Thursday unpack that a little bit, of how you kind of start constructing a story? Because one of my challenges is, which is why I'm doing these Thursday things. We've had a lot of people sign up for our event, but the event is actually quite far away. It's in June, and I thought, well, how can I basically get them started so that they hit the road already running? And it is very hard to go and create a system, which is my specialty, unless you really actually have the blueprint and you have the strategy, and we've had time to unbundle it and pull it out of you of what this big lift is that you're actually trying to do and why you're doing it. And until you know your why, you can't really go create a system. But I would love a little bit of input from you next week on how people can start thinking about their story and start constructing it, so that when they come to the event, they already have some of the blocks, and they're not kind of starting at -10. So if that's kind of cool with you, why don't we do that next Thursday?
Yeah, I think it sounds great. I mean, I always love, interestingly enough, I don't love building systems like you do, which is why, you know, you're so talented at this and have been so successful. I love building systems though for storytelling and for communication. I always joke, I have frameworks within frameworks within frameworks. So oftentimes there's like Russian dolls of frameworks, which is funny because even as I use Russian dolls, that's literally a framework that I use. So anyways, there's lots there for the storytelling stuff that we can unpack and dive into and help people to start kind of building it in the right way, because there is legitimately a right way to build stories, and there are many wrong ways, unfortunately. And most of what I see in the storytelling world that's both taught and that people are implementing, unfortunately, is the wrong way, and it triggers the wrong part of the brain and immediately pumps up resistance instead of decreasing it, which is what you want.
All right, so look, why don't we do this? I know you've got a hard stop at 11:30. I'm going to send us out with a quick little bit of music whilst I recharge my coffee, and then I will stay here in the room. I'll be back in 2 minutes to just answer a couple of questions if anybody wants to say hi and answer a couple of questions. But we'll let Robbie go, and we'll see you next Thursday. Okay?
Hey, everyone.
Is that good?
Beautiful.